Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Magnificent Seven from 2016. The original Magnificent Seven is hailed as probably one of the greatest remakes of all time, not necessarily because it is the greatest movie in the world, which it is a pretty decent and pretty great big studio western, but because it takes the premise of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai and remakes it into a western. The new Magnificent Seven takes the original Magnificent Seven and then makes it into a western. So, not as creative and not really doing as much with the premise that the original itself did, which is disappointing and was already a disappointment when I heard they were making this film. However, unlike most modern remakes who, when they get to that point, it's already a failure, and it's like watching an avalanche as it gets worse and worse as you're watching the film, Magnificent Seven actually manages to have the same kind of feel and fun and enjoyment quality as the original Magnificent Seven. Now, certainly going from Seven Samurai to Magnificent Seven from 1960 to Magnificent Seven in 2016 is like watching a VHS tape that you keep copying onto other VHS tapes, and we're at like third generation quality, and if you actually know what that is, that means something to you, but most of you will be like, shut up, old man, I don't watch videotapes, I watch Snapchat or something. I don't know what the kids do. It feels like it's getting leaner and more fun and not as intelligent and as much about the class struggle that the original Akira Kurosawa Seven Samurai was, and is as in-depth in terms of character. This Magnificent Seven, although it does do character actually rather well, it's more about having a good, fun, good time at the movies with a western than it really is anything else. It doesn't really care as much about the class thing or tyranny. It kind of does a real quick thing at the beginning, which doesn't really set up things other than this guy's bad, you need to stop him because he's like real bad, he killed somebody, you don't like people getting killed, do you? And then so you're like, oh shit, they should get 7 people and premise of movie. And that's basically how they set up this movie. It's not really trying to do anything other than being a modern 2016 remake with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt and all these people, but it lives in it and it enjoys itself so much that you will enjoy it as well. And it's such a refreshing thing to see a big group of fun actors come together with a journeyman director to make a very enjoyable action movie rather than watch another remake that completely misses the point. This remake misses the point of doing anything with it, but misses it in such an enjoyable, perfect way that I wouldn't say it's missing the point. I'm saying it had already missed the point and wasn't going to be like a modern Magnificent Seven or something cool with it. They just decided, hey, let's actually make a really fun, enjoyable, a dad sits in his recliner chair with a beer, relaxing kind of western. And for once, Hollywood could actually succeed in that, which is just a miracle in itself. Basically Bug's Life, but with people in it. No, I'm joking. A small town which is being terrorized by an evil guy played by Peter Skarsgård and his terrible band of mercenaries who are kind of hired guns. After this town is terrorized and many people are killed and they actually burn down their church because they're total dicks, they decide to hire their own mercenaries to defend their town. They find Denzel Washington's character, who assembles a team of 7 people. Some say a Magnificent Seven. They actually do say that a couple times, so that's not me being silly. This is this movie. He manages to get together a bunch of merry band of outlaws and misfits with Chris Pratt, Vincent D'Onofrio, Ethan Hawke, Lee Byung-hun, Manuel Garcia-Rulfo, and Martin Sizemotler. They all get together and have a 7 group of people to defend this town and train this town to shoot so they can fight against Peter Sarsgaard and his evil gang and stop them from terrorizing their town so they can go about their lives and keep being farmers. Now, The Magnificent Seven is based on a great story, which is obviously Seven Samurai, and that's a very universal story, and that's kind of a great thing that this film has to go off of. I mean, obviously we've heard this story a million times through various different versions, so it's not something I think people are as sick of, even though at first I'm like, oh, Magnificent Seven remake, that's a thing I guess we're doing. As boring as it is to see people like over exhaust brands just for like brand recognizability, it kind of works to make another version of it because it's something that obviously they're not remaking Seven Samurai, they're remaking Magnificent Seven, and it's already a riff on something anyway, and it's not too beholden. The Magnificent Seven, although a very good, enjoyable western, is not like an untouchable classic like if you're gonna remake High Noon or something, right? That would be stupid. It definitely works within that, and Anton Fuqua is kind of the perfect director to do it because, like John Sturges, the director of the original, is more of a journeyman kind of studio director, and he's good at doing like action films. And he gets to reteam like Denzel and Ethan Hawke, have Chris Pratt, have like a really great cast of actors together to really make out this film, and it works really well. This film kind of owes a lot more to kind of more enjoyable big studio westerns, which is something I think Hollywood isn't as good at understanding. They try to make them dramas and have someone cry about the Civil War or something, which I guess they do a little, but they don't really like overdo. It's more about having a good time with this cast. I heard people having an enjoyable, fun, audience-friendly time. In fact, it did it better than like most of this terrible summer. Then that was actually a lot of fun. I think this film managed to be a really fun, enjoyable Hollywood movie, but it also seemed to be able to understand what to do with all of its cast. It had individual beats, enough individual beats, not with every character, but enough that you really started to understand them, much more than like something like Suicide Squad, and a lot better at it. In fact, I actually cared about them as a group for once, which is something that I don't think a lot of team-up movies are as good at. Fuqua very much makes a big studio western the way that most people are afraid to make nowadays, but he almost makes it so much more enjoyable because he kind of understands the kind of western he's making, which was more of a fun western. He goes more in the leaner way that the Magnificent Seven, the original, does, which is quite enjoyable. I watched this right next day after I saw the original, and I noticed how he kind of condensed it so much more. He condenses it in a way that actually works for it. Fuqua, I would actually have a little more faith in him remaking other things, because it seems like I've said, you're already kind of handicapped because you're remaking the Magnificent Seven the same way it already remade something. You're literally remaking a remake, which is like a bizarre postmodern kind of black hole of a snake eating its own tail nonsense that you don't think most people can get out of. But Anton Fuqua manages to find a way to actually get it to work despite all that. Yeah, it's not going to be as good as the original Magnificent Seven, although it gets pretty close, and you're not even ever going to make a film ever as good as Seven Samurai, most likely. So fuck it, let's make something really enjoyable. And that vibe that was in the original Magnificent Seven definitely comes through in this Magnificent Seven, and it's just glorious to see that. This is actually the last film James Horner ever scored. Apparently he actually wrote a lot of the score before he died because he was very enthusiastic about this score. The original was actually scored by Elmer Bernstein, and that's a pretty legendary, amazing score, so I understand why James Horner was probably excited to do it. They don't really use the original score except at the very end. Spoilers. But it was James Horner's last score, and he actually did a fairly good job composing like an actual interesting, very distinct score for it. And it's sad to see James Horner go because he was a great composer. They've tried to remake this film several times before this one, and even in the 80s, Walter Hill was going to do it, but then Streets of Fire bombed, so they canceled that. And then at some point, Tom Cruise was going to do it, and the lead, the kind of Yul Brynner Denzel part. And then when Fuqua got involved, he actually decided to add not just a bunch of white actors, which is what the studio originally planned, and he really changed the cast. Now this goes against how Magnificent Seven very much holds to the archetypes from Seven Samurai, or the original Magnificent Seven did that. This Magnificent Seven doesn't hold to that as much. Ethan Hawke is very much playing the kind of dandy character from the original, who is a sharpshooter in the Civil War, or at least that's maybe just in this one. I don't think it was in the other one. Doesn't matter. And even Vincent D'Onofrio's character doesn't exactly feel like someone from the original. Byung-hun Lee is actually someone from the original, who was James Colburn. Denzel Washington is not playing the character that Yul Brynner played, and Chris Pratt isn't even really playing who Steve McQueen played, who I'm assuming that's who he's kind of doing as much. And this Magnificent Seven felt more packaged and more star-driven than the one before, and it's a different vibe to it. I think the cast has a much different vibe than the original, which is good. But I don't exactly like that it strays away from the Seven Samurai thing, but I think it actually works for the movie as a whole, not to just be so beholden to it, which is a problem with the original Magnificent Seven anyway. But this Magnificent Seven, the interesting thing about it is the two leads, the guys you're seeing in all the ads, are Denzel and Chris Pratt. Denzel's kind of just sleepwalking his way through it, but he's still Denzel Washington, and he's still amazing in it the whole time. But Chris Pratt and him feel so ready to give their lines that are going to be used in a million ads and trailers that they don't feel like they have as much soul as the supporting cast, which actually helps the film breathe a lot more. But him and Chris Pratt have a very much a movie star 1-2 throughout this film. They're not really overtaking one another, although Chris Pratt makes a very amazing cowboy. It almost feels like this is his third Western, this is his first Western. That really shows. A lot of these guys feel like they're just aching to do a Western, and they're just so ready for it, they almost feel over-practiced, particularly Chris Pratt. Ethan Hawke, however, I think plays up his character actor vibe that he's had through cheaper, smaller movies that's been going on through all this time. but when he plays off of Denzel, that's when he really shines. If you heard an interview he did with Mark Maron recently where he talked about how when he did Training Day, he watched all of Denzel's films and kind of almost like a football player watches game tape and understood how to play off Denzel correctly and what the right moves were. And there's a few scenes with them together, and the acting's probably my favorite acting in the whole movie. It's almost like Ethan Hawke knows how to play off Denzel so well, and Denzel's having a lot of fun playing off of Ethan Hawke. It's just an amazing kind of back and forth to really watch, and you definitely see that through it. Vincent D'Onofrio is just overselling the shit out of it, and I love it. It's kind of such an over-the-top performance. It's wonderful. Byung-hun Lee, who was in The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. So this is actually, like, if you think about it, not his first Western. He is amazing. I expect more people to like him after this. I hope he gets better roles. And most of the other cast members, like Manuel Garcia-Rulfo, although I don't like how Chris Pratt keeps calling him a Mexican and doing so, that was a little annoying, but I thought he was good. I liked all of the Magnificent Seven, even Martin Sice-Muller, Peter Sarsgaard, who I think just kind of overdoes it and does the really like over-the-top villain thing. Everyone acts like it's a very strange performance. It feels very ordinarily strange villain performance to me. It doesn't feel, honestly, even that special. But the Magnificent Seven does a thing that the original did, and any like good time big Hollywood studio Western did, is that your dad can come home, open a cold beer, and laugh hysterically at some ridiculous thing John Wayne said to these kind of stuffy shirts who live in the Western town kind of thing. And this movie does it really well. Sure, it's not really doing the original, but it's not trying to do the original, but it's doing the original's vibe, and that's what I really love about it. And I think that's something we as an audience are really craving, like a fun, audience-friendly movie, and this is really what this is going for. It doesn't overdo it with trying to say too much. It doesn't really say much of anything. It's so enjoyable and so much fun. You're rooting and people are cheering in the audience. It's actually a really good time at the theater just to have that communal experience of seeing a really fun, enjoyable movie. Are you going to think about it too much? No. But are you going to think about the original Magnificent Seven? No. And if you really wanted an intelligent movie and you haven't seen Seven Samurai and you're going to complain about Hollywood doesn't do anything original anymore and you still haven't seen that movie, should you be doing that instead? Absolutely. But if you're still going to see Magnificent Seven, absolutely see it. It's a really enjoyable, good Hollywood movie, and it's probably one of Fuqua's most enjoyable directed films I can think of in a true, enjoyable, very watchable kind of a way. It gets the spirit of the original and does something different from it. And that's probably more than I could probably expect from most Hollywood remakes that are more about brand identity than anything else. This at least has fun with it and makes an enjoyable, fun time at the movies and understands why people fell in love with kind of cheap, disposable, enjoyable, audience-friendly Western films. And Magnificent Seven, the 2016 remake, is ready to do that again, just like the original did, and go, hey, there's some faith I have in the studio system, even though the whole crux of this thing is kind of a joke in itself that we have a remake of a remake. But why don't we have an enjoyable time with this whole thing and really just relax? So if you have seen The Magnificent Seven and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.